Module 1, Part 1, Overview, Governance and Regulations of Telehealth, brought to you by IMU and Onsana Health. This session is delivered by Dr. Kor Swee Kang, CEO of Onsana Health. By the end of this session, you will be able to identify relevant healthcare-related laws that are applicable to telehealth practice in Malaysia, and define fundamental regulatory terms, concepts, and policies to practice telehealth legally and ethically in the 4 domains of telemedicine, for example, teleconsultation, telemonitoring, telecollaboration, and telesupport.
Hello, everyone. This is the first week of the Fundamentals of Telehealth Micro-Credential program. We will have to start with a bit of an overview of the governance and regulations of telehealth. So with your permission, I'll get straight to it. And in so doing, there's probably about 8 or 9 slides that I have prepared for everyone. And all these slides and material will be available to everyone in the IMU learning management system that all of you will have access to. So following my speech, Charlene will come and give a real-world practice and real-world implications of the governance and the regulatory system for telehealth that we have in Malaysia. So with that in mind, I'll get started. I'll get started by going to presentation mode, and we're going to get started with the first slide, which talks about what is telehealth. So here's a working definition of telehealth. And telehealth has got many different definitions by many different countries and different regulatory systems and different academic definitions of telehealth as well. So I'll give one specific example of telehealth as in the definition of telehealth. And then we move on to the practice of telehealth, which actually can be very broad. And finally, in this one slide, I'll end with what's the difference between telehealth as well as digital health. Okay, we'll read for about 15 seconds or so, just for you to quickly glance through the slide, and then I'll provide some color commentary. So I'll pause here for 15 seconds. Thank you, everyone. There is one good definition of what is telehealth or telemedicine. It's coming from the Singaporean guidelines of 2015. And I read, systematic provision of healthcare services over physically separate environments. What does physically separate means? Like a patient and doctor are in 2 separate locations via ICT or information and communications technology. Each of those words are very broad. So let's not go into a definition of what is provision, what is systematic, what is healthcare, what is services, what is physically separate. These are endlessly fascinating, but perhaps are beyond the scope of our short conversation for this afternoon. So in practice, though, because we're all very practical people, telehealth is very broad. I'll give 5 examples over here, and then I'll discuss what is digital health. Examples over here is telepharmacy. For example, you're reviewing the patient's medicines virtually. The second example is radiology, that you take an X-ray or a CT scan in Malaysia today, and then overnight, a radiologist in, for example, India or in South Africa will review the CT scans in the X-rays and then send you a report by the time you wake up in the morning. The third example is teleoptometry or teleophthalmology, where we're reviewing fundus images virtually after taking a picture of the retina or the fundus using a camera with or without dilation of the pupils. Fourthly is tele-rehab. There are services and companies out there with a library of rehab videos. I don't know what's the actual number, but it's around 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 videos of 2 to 3 minutes each for rehab exercises that the patient can do. And then you subscribe on a monthly basis. And finally, telemedicine, which means that you're delivering consultations virtually. For the doctors out there, we like telemedicine. For the non-doctors out there, they like the term telehealth because health is a lot broader than medicine, and medicine is generally speaking limited mostly to doctors and to pharmacists. So if telehealth has a broader definition of digital health, then the applications become even broader, meaning telehealth can be considered a subset of digital health. When we consider digital health, we may be able to consider things like wearables, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence or machine learning to help you diagnose a particular disease as is currently available using ChatGPT and Google AI, or even something called a decision support system, meaning an algorithm or a software that helps doctors make clinical decisions like what is the dose of warfarin that I should start with a patient? How do I counsel this particular patient to take this therapy versus that therapy? So telehealth can be very broad, and I've given 5 specific examples over here and a much broader definition of digital health. Let me move on a little bit to the next slide. And I'd like to share in the next 2 slides 2 classification systems. The first classification system to look at is a Singapore classification system. Now, this is by no means saying the gold standard. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that this is one way to classify telehealth. In the next slide, we'll look at how the Indian system is classifying telehealth. So in Singapore, it classifies into teletreatment, so using telehealth or remote tools to treat, or telehealth or remote tools to collaborate, meaning treat patients and to collaborate within healthcare professionals. Like we talk often about a multidisciplinary team. If you're working as a solo practitioner, it's not always easy for you to have a multidisciplinary team, as in you need a nutritionist, a pharmacist, a physiotherapist on board, on site, and that's not always easy for you to have something like that. Therefore, you use telehealth tools to collaborate. Or you can use, thirdly, telehealth tools to monitor, remote patient monitoring in the context of a clinical trial or not in the context of a clinical trial. And fourthly, telesupport. Support is very broad. It could be education, it could be third-party administration, care administration, it could be patient support programs. All that is considered telesupport. Now, these are the 4 classifications that the Singaporeans are using. In the next slide, I will show you what the Indians are using. And the Indians are using a telehealth classification in India based on the 2020 guideline that looks not at the way care is delivered, but broken into how care is delivered, the mode of communication, when the information is transmitted, why we're doing the consultation, and who is doing the consultation. So Singapore does the what approach, teleconsultation, tele-rehab, and so on. Whereas in India, it's more the how, the when, the why, and the who is involved. Now, I can't tell you, and nobody can ever tell you, that one classification system is better than the other, that one taxonomy is better than the other. I don't think that the World Health Organization really even has a taxonomy of digital health or telehealth for one main reason, that technology goes on so quickly that it's impossible for a taxonomy system or a classification system to remain static. And I'm just giving an example over here of how the Singaporeans and the Indians are doing it. Malaysia has got a reasonable classification of telehealth as well, but not as clearly defined as what the Indian system or the Singaporean system is presenting. So it's less important for us to consider the different classifications of telehealth, but perhaps more important for us to consider what are the underlying first principles and the guiding principles and the regulations, therefore, of telehealth. And this is where I go into my next few slides. The last section, or I just only have 2 sections. So this second section is the last section of my presentation before I turn the floor to Charlene. And this is about how telehealth is regulated in Malaysia. And as a just to put Charlene on the spot a little bit, is to say that even WhatsApp communications between a doctor and a patient, that a patient asks you a question just on text message, like, "Doctor, do I increase my dose?" for example, that may already be considered telehealth. So this is something for us definitely to consider about how telehealth is regulated in Malaysia. So we'll move on. But while I do that, Aisha, if you don't mind, every now and then we may have to mute the other participants. Thank you, Aisha. We'll move on, okay, to how telehealth is regulated. And this is one of maybe 2 slides that I would like to show you about the breadth of telehealth regulations in Malaysia. Meaning telehealth regulations in Malaysia are very, very broad. So narrowing down right now to Malaysia, and when we pass over to Charlene, she'll give us a more practical understanding of what these individual laws mean. Now, I'm only showing this on this one slide, what the telehealth regulations are in Malaysia. The next slide and the final slide that I have will be what are the healthcare regulations of Malaysia, meaning to say that telehealth is a subset of healthcare, and healthcare is a lot bigger, and telehealth is a subset of the broader healthcare regulation systems. Now, in telehealth alone, there are many, many documents that are involved. And they're listed at the moment in chronological order, ranging from 1997 all the way to 2020. I'll pause here for 15 seconds, if you don't mind, everyone, for you to quickly glance through what the table will say about the telehealth regulations in Malaysia, and then I'll provide some color commentary. Great. So, We were told, my colleagues and I were told yesterday by the gentleman who led the Telemedicine Act in 1997 and was responsible for the policy statement in 1997 as well, that when the first two, the policy statement by the Ministry of Health and the Act of Telemedicine in 1997, that came from a consortium of about 30 consultants from about 20 countries. And we were told yesterday by the originator of this particular policy statement and the Act, who was the Director General of Health at that time. The point being that this was a beautiful statement of intent and where Malaysia wants to go in terms of telemedicine. And it dated back to 1997, a full 20-something years ago. And that's a great explanation and great demonstration of where telehealth's potential was identified by Malaysia at that time. Now, whether or not Malaysia has achieved those ideals and potential, it's perhaps subject of a different micro-credential. The point I'm making over here is that we have a long history in Malaysia of telemedicine regulations. And it's just become a little clearer over time. So, for example, there's an act, the Multimedia Communications and Multimedia Act in 1998 had some provisions about healthcare and transmission of information. The Medical Device Act talked about how certain devices, and these days we have software as a medical device that could be considered telehealth or digital health. Then we had additional policy statements by the Ministry of Health, advisory guidelines by the Malaysian Medical Council, and more recently, less a regulation, but a regulatory lab for online health services providers, or OHS regulatory lab, that was launched by the Ministry of Health in February of 2022. With industry participation, where digital health companies, telehealth companies, telemedicine companies are able to come together to co-create the guidelines in appropriate ways, of course, co-creation of guidelines and regulations surrounding telehealth with the Ministry of Health. My friends, the takeaway from this slide is that there are many telehealth regulations in Malaysia, and the history is quite long, about 26 years ago. Let me move on to the last slide over here before I turn over to Charlene. That telehealth acts and regulations are only a subset of the broader healthcare law landscape in Malaysia. What I mean to say about this is that the healthcare laws in Malaysia all apply to telehealth activities as well. In other words, let's look at this: the Medical Act, the Dental Act, the Nurses Act, and so on. They apply in real life, physical, in-person attendances in a physical clinic, in a brick and mortar hospital. Those acts apply. And those acts, the Medical Act, Dental Act, Education Act, Inventure Act, all those acts also apply into cyberspace, meaning you not only, a telehealth provider needs to follow the laws, not only of telehealth, but also the healthcare laws of Malaysia. And these can be broadly divided into several categories. And these categories are my categories, or they're not categories by the Attorney General's chambers. The first one is professional entry requirements. How do you qualify as a doctor to deliver telehealth? How do you qualify as a nurse, and so on? So these are professional entry requirements. There are also laws for the clinical practice of health, meaning the actual service delivery, notably the Private Healthcare Facilities and Services Act 1998, or PHFSA. How do you prescribe a medicine online? How do you give a medical certificate online? All these things are governed by laws surrounding the clinical practice of health. Thirdly, because health is more than just healthcare, there's also the employment laws for employment of doctors and employment of healthcare professionals. The EPF Act, Workers' Minimum Standards of Housing and Amenities Act, these are employment acts of healthcare that may apply to telehealth as well. Fourthly, the MCMC Act, Personal Data Protection Act, Insurance Act, Telemedicine Act, passed but not gazetted, so in 1997, these are all laws that also apply to telehealth activities. In green over here, and this is where I end, is that the owners of these laws and regulations don't only sit with the Ministry of Health. Of course, the Ministry of Health is a key stakeholder in various acts like the Atomic Energy Licensing Act, for CT scans, MRIs, and PET scans, and isotopes and radioisotopes and nuclear material that is used for PET scans and nuclear chemotherapy, for example. So all that, although the Ministry of Health is a major stakeholder, the Ministry of Science and Environment and Energy are also involved in, for example, the Atomic Energy Licensing Act. In terms of telehealth, therefore, when we're thinking about the regulations of telehealth, we cannot only think about the regulations of telehealth by the Ministry of Health, we must also think about the regulations of telehealth by other ministries. higher education, SIRIM, the Department of Occupational Safety and Health, MCMC, and so on. So with that in mind, the broad landscape of and the long history really of telehealth regulations in Malaysia and the very broad landscape of healthcare laws in Malaysia, allow me to pause here. I'll start sharing my screen and I'll pass the floor to Charlene, my old friend. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Aisha, and Charlene, thank you. Over to you.